colleagues, dear friends, these 3 days have passed very quickly, really flew, as we say. And it feels that the program was very busy, but even quicker time flew than we had expected. This was conference number 3, according to the saying. The first time it's a chance, the second it is an occasion, the third time is a regular rule. So our success is then considered as something which has been destined. And today we welcome Natalia once again, and Natalia Danilina, President of Заповедное посольство Charity and Educational Foundation, and Vladimir Mashkala, Head of UNEP in Russia, and remotely Yulia, who is from the banking community, and Boris Erk, Director, Regional Office for Eastern Europe and Central Asia, UNC. Boris, can you hear us well? Wonderful. Yulia, can you hear us well? Wonderful. Natalia, let us start with you. So, what's your opinion of the third conference? What was the difference this time compared to the first? Whether the format of the conference changed, whether we worked in a different manner, what was proactive? Have we managed to achieve anything? Good afternoon, dear friends, dear colleagues, and Boris, hello, and I say hi to all the international guests. It is very nice to see you because not always technical communication is so reliable. This time it is fine, and we can continue our discussion. I would say that the third conference is successful, and it is an event in our industry. It is an event in our inter-ministerial, inter-industrial communication, and it is important, and we all feel so. Of course, its main specific feature is that in this strange world that we live in, when we cannot meet in person with people whom we long to meet, and the discussions have to be modeled differently now, and not always these models really are reliable. Sometimes technologies fail because when there is too much load on the communication lines. So we're learning how to communicate, how to work in a different format. And no matter what challenges there were, still we have done it, and this is great. But the importance of this conference and the use of this conference, this is also an obvious thing. And as for my personal opinion, this conference has been very useful because it allowed every participant and all the participants realistically assess today's situation, understand where we are. And we are in transition. And when we compare this conference to the previous conferences, we are right now in a different realm, in a different world. And in this world, we have to find new solutions, many solutions, dealing with tourism development. We have recognized new challenges. We have recognized new opportunities and new instruments of how to make them true. And we are trying, in our discussions during the workshops and also outside of the workshops informally, find things that would help us overcome these challenges. What was new? First, it has become clear that ecotourism, which quite often is referred to as nature tourism or natural tourism, is in the development. On the one hand, it shows new experience accumulated. On the other side, the new challenges have been highlighted. And now we understand that the demand for this tourism is much greater than a couple of years ago when we hosted just the first conference. Now that people have had to be on quarantine and had to be socially distanced, they needed nature, and once there was relaxation of all these restrictions, they just rushed out into the nature, and we have to take it as an opportunity and manage this process. During this conference, I found it very important, and I shared this with my colleagues, that we have realized the new demand of the business to work, not just to find new funds and new resources, but to implement things, to make things happen. And I was very much impressed by the banking sector participation, because they outlined very clearly and very distinctly their aptitude and their wish to cooperate, and they set forward very clearly their requirements to us so that they could be our partners, including the sphere of ecotourism. And it was very clear in the presentation on behalf of Sberbank and also others that there is a great demand for participation with us in our project. And I think that for many this is an encouragement, but also the guidelines. So this is the guide of what we should do to grow in our competencies and our resourcefulness. This conference has featured that we have found new dimensions, including international dimensions. We cannot, or we don't have to rely only on our experience. We have to learn from international experience, including experience of conducting international conferences. And when we are isolated, then we feel that we need international dimensions. And we opened with United Nations representatives, with the UNWTO and UNEP representatives who do so much, and they have contributed a lot into this conference come true. And this support was very important because it means that our channels of communication are not shut down by the pandemic. It is important. Yet another important issue which I think is our concern and deserves lots of rethinking is that quite often the loud words may catch attention, but quite often these are just promotional things, the catchy phrases, and not the words about the real things done. So in other words, we need to put forward and talk about our best practices. If those who are best practices cannot promote themselves, then the promotion of other projects would speak louder, unfortunately. And well, we of course can be dissatisfied, but dissatisfied only with things in which we have to do better, to promote better. We have to showcase our best practices so that the public, the wider public, would really appreciate it, and so that our impact would be obvious to everybody, positive impact. Yet another important feature of this conference, and which I find important for future as well, is that we have started this special workshop, a dialogue on the cultural heritage and natural heritage put together. I think it was a very bright workshop, and the fact that museums and protected zones, which is a combination of heritage of cultural and natural phenomena, I think that this enhances the positions of those who are promoters of this ecotourism direction segment of it in terms of enlightenment, public outreach, because these museums and these protected zones that were presented here by Kulikova and Tsaritsina, they managed to present their concept in such a bright way that we were very much impressed. And this symbiosis, this synergy of culture and nature is a great resource which we need to put forward. Yet another important observation is that we have covered not only what has become already our experience. We put forward also the clear messages that guide us forward. For example, Peter Shpelinok, with his position, was well received. I think that his message is very important, and his presentation was very important, that we need the society with higher and very high environmental awareness, or culture as we call it, environmental culture, environmental awareness, environmental education. This approach, which was presented by Piotr, I think that this is very important. This is really a sound standing, because the society needs tourism which is not destructive, the tourism that supports the environment, helps preservation of nature. So this enlightenment, this value of tourism as an educational asset, I think this message is really important, and it is now taking the shape of guidelines. Also, I should remember Mikhail Yablikov's message, that he said that we have to shift the models of consumption, because tourism has become the sphere of services, the sphere of consumption, and the shift of this model, or the replacement of this model, is on the agenda. We have to change from being consumers, I mean the humankind, to the activities preserving nature. If people can live thanks to preservation of nature, thanks to the national nature resources preserved, then we have the horizons for making this sphere our active sphere of participation. So this is the positive message which impacted me. I recognized it at this conference, and I'm inspired by it. And I think that this conference shows that though there are so many challenges today, so many issues to resolve, still this platform, this conference, is the standpoint from which we can make further steps with more assurance. And as we say, still there is much to do, and we have recognized it during our conference, because all those who were online or offline and discussed discussions, we have recognized that before we resolve these current challenges, we will challenges of definitions. Before we resolve this issue of definitions, we will be stumbling against this and be misunderstood. And this misunderstanding leads to conflicts. So it might seem, what's a definition? What's terminology? But definitions arouse conflicts, arouse disputes, and sometimes even distracts those who can be our supporters, our colleagues. And we saw this clearly during the workshop when the representative from Rostourism caused some tension in the audience and even more tension online. And so, yes, we have to say that before next conference, we have to make some special efforts in terms of definitions, terminology, to refer to the experts, those who can lobby, also the harmonized definitions, what ecotourism is, what nature tourism is. And when we have this established, then we can move forward. But to draw the line, I would say that this was a very successful conference, and I'm absolutely grateful to the organizers and to Rosa Huter Resort and to the technical personnel who, working under stress and in the situations of technological failure, slow signal of internet here and also somewhere over there where our attendees were at a distance. Nevertheless, the conference took place and was successful. And right now, those who failed to connect on time or lost the connection, so nevertheless, they will be given access to the open resource of all the materials. I know that this can be criticized and will be criticized, but this is life. This is life, and I think that this was just what I draw from this conference. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for drawing this together. Nobody else could do it as good as you, particularly about the priority areas that you outlined, because quite often we think that lots of constructive, proactive things fail, in the opinion of many, because of minor technical discrepancies. So on the outcomes of this third forum, we need to somehow unify definitions and so on. So we talked about structure today, but the language is quite often the painful area, so it does not help us. And that's why I'm giving the floor now to continue to Boris. Boris, we give you the floor. Unfortunately, we didn't see you this time. I don't want to ask you to draw the line on the conference, but the question, how did the vision of international community change this year? There is the pandemic, there is economic recession. What has changed on your side over this year? How would you define what is happening right now in the tourism industry, in the nature protection area and sustainable development?
Thank you, Chairman, and to all the participants physically or online. So, здравствуйте, добрый день. Before I start, there was an idea to present a short video. So I don't know if we can do it now, and then I can give my intervention afterwards.
Boris.
Thank you very much. Большое спасибо. Well, this video, this short video, sort of sets the scene in a way and sends a very strong message that nature is for all. I would like first to, of course, to thank the thank the organizers for inviting IUCN to be part of the conference. Despite the fact that I wasn't able to travel and enjoy the beautiful Caucasus as I did last year, and unparalleled hospitality of people in the region. I'm very pleased to be part of the discussion today and part of the panel. I would like also to send greetings to my dear colleagues Natalia and Vladimir, whom I long to see. It's been long since we met last time. And also, of course, good afternoon to all the participants. I wasn't really in the conference, but I think that Natalia summarized it extremely well. And I thank Natalia for fleshing out or highlighting key points from the past 3 days. I think, even so I wasn't there, I wasn't present, I think that it's quite well resonates with me, and I think that it was quite a good account of what was going on. I could even build on her intervention by saying that it's more than ever we have to be connected. So it's not just nature for all, but even if we look into nature conservation and tourism industry, there's more than ever we have to work together to share experience, to learn lessons one from another, in order to, as we say, build back better. This year 2020 is supposed to be we coined it as a super year for nature, for biodiversity. I was supposed to host 2 big global get-togethers on nature conservation, the IUCN World Conservation Congress and the CBD, Conference on Parties, and both events were postponed. And it's still uncertain how exactly and when they will be organized. So I would really like to congratulate the organizers for organizing, not giving up, and organizing the conference despite all the challenges and difficulties. There is a lot of learning for all of us, and this year is really unprecedented. You know, last year when we parted, we said we see each other next year, so nobody could imagine what will happen over the past year, over the past 6 or 9 months. And this is very unique environment where we live in. We are all affected. I mean, it's needless to say and to tell you how the tourism industry has been hit, how hard it has been hit, with all the income, all the revenues, and all the jobs that the industry was and is creating. One in 10 jobs in the world are in the tourism industry, and a good share of it comes from builds on nature. And it's nature tourism, it's ecotourism, it's recreational tourism, it's tourism in protected areas. So apart from being a massive human tragedy, of course, it's a massive impact on our lives, on our livelihoods. But it helped us also to learn to draw some lessons, and more than ever we understand that basically the relationship between humans and nature is disrupted, that there is something wrong with. We knew that, but COVID made it obvious. You know, how much we encroached into natural environment, how unsustainably we manage and use natural resources. So that's a very strong message that was sent to us, that we were made aware of, and that we are discussing more and more. There's a lot of science and a lot of evidence where COVID emerges from, and how it relates to nature. it's quite well, already well documented. And we also have a lot of evidence on how particular industries and certain sectors were affected. There was a recent report in Africa showing that that more than 90% of safari tourism businesses have reduced their bookings for more than 75%. So it's, you know, it's 3/4 of their bookings were gone, almost like overnight. So it's a massive impact, not just on the industry, but also on communities, on people who live in those natural areas, whose income and whose livelihoods are also fully dependent on well-functioning tourism. So those are all facts and figures. And now the question is basically how we recover from that. And there is a role for all of us to play. We at IUCN, we think that protected areas can play a massive role in our recovery, in our building back, as nature being a safety net in a way. As Natalia said, so once we are unlocked, then we simply go to nature. You know, it's a safe place to be. There is a concept that is growing rapidly on One Health. So the health of people, it depends on the health of the planet, the health of nature. So it's One Health approach that we are hopefully moving into, and that's something that we should very strongly bear in mind. We are still amidst the crisis, and of course that some past experience shows that the recovery period is not that short. So we also have to be aware of that. It could be even up to 2 years, and there are also some indications that the industry will be heavily impacted through 2022, which is almost like 1.5 or 2 years from now on. So there are some challenges to live with, to cope with. But we at IUCN, we think that we should really kind of, you know, use this as fundamentally rethinking our relation with nature, and the way how we manage natural resources, how we utilize natural resources, and certainly the nature tourism is part of it. From what I heard in discussion with colleagues is that Rosa Huta Resort was somehow coping with, and I'm glad to hear that, providing new offers, developing new products, turning to new markets. So domestic tourism is on the rise. So if there is some blessing in disguise, is that we are discovering new opportunities and that we are discovering new options. So nature is there for us. So we should really kind of, you know, we should look into how we organize, how we build a market in nature tourism in order to respect nature more. Because there is no nature tourism if there is no nature as such. So that's one of the key messages we have to bear in mind. Now we are into building back better, and my message would be not just building back better. It's actually building back better with nature, or building back nature. Because if we don't turn the tides, this crisis will happen again. And it's a question then if we will manage to overcome it once again. So it's better to put some effort into creating new mechanisms, new policies, new practices, in creating that relation with nature better, both for nature and for us. So back to the video, it's nature for all. Respect the nature, protect the nature, and then there will be, then we will be able to also to create our livelihoods based on nature. So I truly hope that next year we will be seeing each other face to face, and that I or some of my colleagues will be able to travel and to visit the beautiful nature you live with. and I'm sending really strong message. Keep up, don't give up. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Boris. Thank you, Boris, very much. Thank you. Of course, we'll not give up, and we really hope to see you again next year and next years here at our forum. Thank you very much, Boris, one more time. So keep strong, go strong, and keep up. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Yulia, now I have a message to you. Are you online? Yes. Okay. Thank you very much, first of all, for your input during the economic issues discussed during the previous workshop. We discussed how the economy of tourism feels and works these days. But now, what do you think? What are the priority issues for the tourism industry, for sustainable development? What should be the focus of our attention? Because Natalia said very rightfully that it's for the third year that we discuss, but there is still the misunderstanding about or misagreement about the definitions. But where would you focus our attention? What is your main message for us so that we would bear after this conference? Thank you very much for giving me the floor. Indeed, we were one of the organizers or initiators of putting the banking community among the speakers on the agenda, because there is a great demand on behalf of the society, but also the financial circles of financing and helps providing support to meaningful projects, because tourism is one of the recipes that would help us to recover from the pandemic locally, but also not only locally, to recreate and recover the jobs and develop the local economy. And of all the measures in different countries, it is such projects that we associate with in nature tourism that we find most important. And it is very important so that environmentalists and tourism experts would speak common language with the bankers so that we could choose the mechanisms of responsible tourism. I don't think that economy is the right word, because economy doesn't come first, but judging from the general approaches today that are very relevant, environment and economy, they are equally important. So the marginal issues that had been previously named as important as problems for cooperation between bankers and projects. Now we have shifted our understanding of priorities. Bankers also are important are also ready to provide support to projects that deal with environmental issues. But for that, we need more transparency on behalf of tourism and the instruments that would help to regulate the projects, but also the local initiatives, because without participation of locals, natural or nature-oriented projects would not come true. And I think that this is one of the most important things. In other words, it is very important to define the tools by which we can support your projects, and we should not only think about the economic cost efficiency. Yes, we understand that now our approaches are shifting us to other dimensions from the profitability of projects. And now I will ask you, Vladimir, to take the floor. Couldn't you add a little bit more to the issues that have been identified as painful during the conference? Did you feel anything that should be put on the agenda and resolved soon? Good afternoon. Thank you for giving me the floor. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank the organizers and for the invitation to take part in this third conference. And I would like to express my gratitude to Rosa Hutter, the resort, as a host. I also would like to congratulate Vyacheslav Fetisov, who is the UN Goodwill Ambassador, who is the flagship and the patron on many issues, starting from the polar exploration and the ecosystem in Arctic and Antarctic and the climate change. So it is very pleasant to have him on board in the community of people who are concerned with the climate change, but also ecotourism as a tool. And we congratulate him to be appointed as the Goodwill Ambassador on behalf of the United Nations. I think that this provides him with even more authority. Coming back to what happened this year. At the beginning of the year, if we all look back, let us remember that we started celebrating this year as the 75th anniversary of the United Nations and its charter. But the year started with big fire which happened in different parts of the world and that were really unprecedentedly dangerous. But there were also other phenomena, pests, and also some other things, and the flood in the Arabian Gulf. So the nature was warning us. We thought in the end of January that what could be worse? And suddenly there came this pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic that hit every country, every business, every person. Everyone had to reshape the way we worked. We had to start working remotely and give it a thought how to survive and how to build the new world with consideration of what has happened. Many international events were shifted to the uncertain future. Later, I will mention the conference on biodiversity, which is the leader at the forefront of the policies in the sphere of protection of biodiversity. But the conference, the convention, last convention adopted the resolution with the Aichi goals that this year we can draw the line that many objectives have been delivered, but unfortunately of 20, only one was fully achieved. The 17% of surface of the land being protected as the protected area. As for the latest news, as of today, it's not 17, but 18%. As for other goals, they were partially fulfilled, but the objectives were chosen in such a manner so that the objectives of sustainable development till the year 2030 were also included in the aims of sustainable development. Five years passed. Where we are now, it is very difficult to say. Whether we are close or far from implementation of this agenda, I don't know. Russia has proposed its own report this year, but there is still time, 10 years to go before 2030, so that the objectives would be achieved and life would be more sustainable, in more harmony with nature, and so that we would use lots of resources. But General Secretary of the United Nations announced the next decade, the decade of activities aimed on sustainable development objectives. And before the General Assembly of the United Nations, there will be summits, and the heads of countries will be discussing and reporting on the problems of how this objectives should be achieved. At the same time, it was very nice to see such people as Boris, who is representing the IUNC, and we look forward to the global summit on nature protection, which was planned for January, but it was postponed. It is postponed, and we don't know till what time, till fall perhaps. It was first January, then now I looked at the website and they didn't specify the dates. So we still look forward to these updates, but it is going to be one of the major events in the agenda of nature protection, defining the policy in terms of nature protection and biodiversity protection. And the next year, there will be this 5th session of the UN Assembly on nature protection. So far, it hasn't been postponed. This is the summit on nature protection on the globe, and it was planned for 22nd, 26th February, but most likely, because the United Nations is the organization which is rather bureaucratic, and to postpone anything without the decision of the General Assembly is impossible, we think that this summit will take place, but perhaps it will be held in a specific format. So there is the budget, there is the program, there is the resolution, and the decision on the next meeting of the Assembly. And perhaps it will be next year, because normally this Assembly General Assembly meets once in 2 years. So, and I am involved in the UN Nature Protection chapter of UN, which is the world leader in environmental policy in the world. For the organization of United Nations and members of this organization, we can expect that next year will be critically important in terms of solutions and decisions to be taken in terms of nature protection. So there will be the 5th meeting of the parties who are members of the Framework Conference on Climate Change and the Convention on Biodiversity, during which, instead of the objectives that had been set previously, there will be new objectives adopted, and this will be our guidelines till the year 2050. And in 2022, perhaps in the beginning, during the UN Assembly on environmental issues, there will be new guidelines, new initiatives announced, and correspondingly, participants, the ministries of nature from different countries will be taking decisions for the period till 2030 and onwards. As for this conference, our conference, I think that it turned out to be very useful. First of all, it was a meeting with familiar colleagues and introduction to new friendships, and it is very pleasant to be aware of the importance now given to our agenda by the ministry. So now we see the government is aware of our concerns, and even the nomination of Mr. Fetisov, the Goodwill Ambassador, is important. But when the head of the ministry knows that there is some priority issue and understands that certain solutions need to be taken urgently, I think that this is a great step forward. But though Russia is part of many conventions and every ministry participates in some integrated strategies, but unfortunately not always and not all consider international experience. And when we look from a side, the availability of the strategy is a very positive move, but not all strategies are coordinated. And when you read strategies published by other ministries, you understand that they still are far away from awareness of the strategy of sustainable development. And at the same time, as has been said, nature has wondered that we cannot live now being guided by old principles and habits. So now we have to change. And with the framework of the United Nations Organization and the International Union of Nature Conservation. So there have been many conservatives announced. For example, the United Nations recently made the resolution on establishment of some framework programs on sustainable consumption, sustainable production, and UNEP is kind of a secretariat, and one of the programs is on the development of tourism. I would say that, unfortunately, the Russian Federation is not quite actively involved in the development of such programs, though it was at the forefront, at the cradle of such programs. And as far as I understand, the participation of only some individual experts is included, but not the entire community or not the ministry of Russia. So I think that such initiatives should be upscaled and should be escalated to the government so that Russia would be more involved formally at the level of the entire state, so that we could also adapt the international experience in Russia, so that we could borrow from it, and as a consequence, so that we would push forward ourselves proactively. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We will take this steady course towards the objectives set. And now some last minutes will be given to Natalia, I think. Natalia, what is the final message that we will hear at this third conference, international conference on ecotourism, challenges and prospects for Russia? Well, if you just authorize me, I will proceed from what Vladimir Shkal said, that indeed today in the world there are so many strategic documents already adopted and worked out, and we are convinced again and again that if we continue working in the sphere of nature protection and ecotourism and tourism with nature is something that is aimed at preserving nature, then we need cooperation. We need to sustain this cooperation. Cooperation is very important, and it's been said so many times during the workshops here that it is important to have the support of those who have experience. We have to rely on the experience and promote best practices, because these practices do exist and they have been mentioned here so many times, and it is very important to be more proactive in influencing the international nature protection agenda. It is important because unfortunately over recent years we have become less active internationally due to some shortage of energy or perhaps something else which allowed us in the past to be at the forefront of different agendas. And I think that it is not by chance that the ambassador, goodwill ambassador, is the person who encouraged this conference. And let us take this chance. Let us take this chance so that to enhance our impact internationally as well. Because by doing so, we will enhance our own influence nationally. Because when we combine the international experience with our domestic experience, I think that this is the best way of how to resolve issues, particularly and including in the ecological tourism, because we all want our tourism developed domestically, but when the pandemic finishes and the world opens again, We want the world to come here. We invite the world to come here. And all these beautiful pictures that we saw in presentations during this conference, they are the best proof that we have so much to share, so much to show to the world. So my message is, let us come together nationally, come together internationally, because while the head of the government supports us, we have to use this support and use this situation to rely on this support and move forward in our objectives. So this is pathetic, yet very proactive. Thank you very much. So that's it. So that's the end of our conference, and in conclusion, I would like to thank the organizers, the participants, the guests, the viewers, the hosting resort of Rosa Hutter and the Slava Foundation. And let us give a big hand and applaud to the organizers, the technical support, those who had to resolve so many organizational and technical issues. Thank you very much. It was really cool. Thank you. It was great. Thank you.